The parchment bore the aquila. My hands trembled as I read my name. I am Scribe Militant Jaron Voss, formerly of the 88th Carthian Infantry, and I survived conscription, training, and 3 years in the Emperor's service. Tonight I break protocol. I speak the truth they do not tell you. May the Emperor judge me for this testimony. In the name of the Golden Throne, I testify. I am Scribe Militant Jaron Voss, currently assigned to the Munitorum Archives on Segmentum Command Station Baca. My hands still shake when I hold a lasgun, though I have not fired one in combat for 2 years. The nightmares persist. The faces of the dead visit me in the small hours, speaking words I cannot quite hear. But I am alive. That alone makes me a statistical anomaly. Last month, Administratum Adept Kelly's delivered a data slate to my station. It contained conscription records from my homeworld of Carthage Secundus, casualty reports, tithe assessments, recruitment projections for the next decade. As I processed the numbers, I saw my own name in the archives from 9 years past. Voss Jaron, age 18, selected for Imperial Guard service under Departamento Munitorum Decree 447 Alpha, status, tithed. One line, that is all my conscription merited in official records. One line that changed everything. Tonight, fellow servants of the Imperium, I will tell you what that line truly means. Not the propaganda, not the glory speak of the Departamento Munitorum. The reality of what happens when your world's tithe comes due and your name is called. Settle yourself, let your breathing slow, and understand, this testimony is not sedition. I remain loyal, but loyalty demands truth, and the truth is that the Imperial Guard is built on the broken backs of children who never asked to die on worlds they cannot pronounce. May the Emperor forgive me for speaking plainly. Tithe Day. Every world in the Imperium pays tithes. Most citizens understand this abstractly. They know the Administratum demands grain, or manufactured goods currency. They accept this as the cost of the Emperor's protection. What they do not understand until it is too late is that worlds also tithe flesh. Carthage Secundus is an agri-world in the Helican subsector. 60 billion souls spread across 3 continents of engineered cropland, living in high villages that service the great harvest combines. My family grew obscura grain in the shadow of Hive Secundus for 6 generations. We were not wealthy, but we were not starving. We paid our taxes, attended chapel every sex day, believed in the Emperor's divine plan. I was 18 years old when the Munitorum ships arrived. They came without warning, as they always do. 3 system defense monitors and a bulk lander that descended through the clouds like the fist of an angry god. The landing zone was the central plaza of Hive Secundus, where 3 million citizens could gather for imperial festivals and executions. The Voxcasters crackled to life at dawn. All citizens of military age, 18 to 45 standard years, will report to Plaza Imperialis for tithe assessment. Compliance is mandatory. The Emperor protects. Let your breathing deepen. Feel the dread settling over a world. My mother wept as she pressed my father's dog tags into my hand. He had died when I was 7, tithed during the Orpheus Salient campaign. His regiment, the 73rd Carthian, was annihilated on a world called Septimus Reach Fighting Orcs. Of the 8,000 men who left Carthage, fewer than 300 returned. I was about to learn why. The selection. The plaza was a sea of humanity. 3 million souls, mostly young, standing in ordered ranks while Adeptus Administratum scribes processed our data slates. The elderly and infirm watched from the terraces, silent, knowing what was coming. We stood for 17 hours. No food, no water, no shade beneath Carthage's white sun. The heat was murderous. Citizens collapsed by the hundreds. Medici servitors dragged them away, whether to hospitals or corpse grinders I never learned. At sunset, the commissars arrived. They wore black greatcoats and peaked caps, each bearing the aquila in polished silver. Their faces were harder than stone, eyes cold as void ice. One of them, Commissar Lieutenant Markham, I later learned, mounted the podium and spoke into a vox amplifier. Citizens of Carthage Secundus, the Emperor has need of soldiers. The Departamento Munitorum has assessed this world's tithe at 12 regiments, approximately 120,000 able-bodied men and women. You have been gathered here to fulfill your sacred duty to the Imperium. 120,000. Out of 3 million gathered, roughly 1 in 25. The odds seemed good, did they not? Perhaps your name would not be called. Perhaps you would return home, resume your life, pretend this day never happened. But the Munitorum does not select at random. Let your muscles release their tension. The horror is methodical. They called us forward in blocks of 1,000. We stood before medici stations where servitors scanned us with auspex devices, measuring bone density, lung capacity, genetic markers, psychological profiles. The process took 6 minutes per citizen. Those deemed fit received a green mark on their wrist. Those deemed unfit received red and were sent home. I received green. So did my childhood friend Mikkel. So did Sarna, the girl I had courted for 3 years, planning marriage after harvest season. So did 70% of those processed. We did not understand yet. Green did not mean conscripted, it meant eligible. The true selection came next. The lottery. The commissars divided us, the green marked, into new formations of exactly 1,000 souls each. We were led to holding pens constructed of plasteel barriers, guarded by armed militarum tempestus scions whose faces were hidden behind rebreather masks. Commissar Markham addressed us again. The Emperor does not demand the weak. He demands the strong, the faithful, the willing. You have been assessed and found worthy, but not all of you will serve. The Munitorum employs a lottery system, blessed by the ecclesiarchy, to determine which among you shall take up arms in his name. A lottery, as if this were a game, as if our lives were dice to be rolled. They brought out a massive brass drum, 10 meters tall, filled with data chits bearing our identification numbers. A tech priest in red robes turned the drum while chanting binaric hymns. One by one, numbers were drawn. When your number was called, you stepped forward. You were given a lasgun, a rucksack containing basic kit, and orders to board the bulk landers within 6 hours. 6 hours to say goodbye to your entire life. Mikkel's number was called in the first 100. He looked back at me, his face white with shock, and mouthed a single word: no. I never saw him again. Sarna's number was called 3 hours into the lottery. She did not cry. She simply walked forward, accepted her gear, and joined the formations heading toward the landers. I shouted her name. She did not turn around. I waited in that pen for 11 hours, listening to numbers called, watching friends and strangers march toward the ships. My number was not called. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt only guilt. Then Commissar Markham made an announcement that changed everything. The initial lottery has filled 100,000 positions. However, the tithe demands 120,000. We require 20,000 additional soldiers. All remaining eligible citizens will now undergo secondary assessment. There was no lottery for the secondary selection. They simply walked through the pens, pointing at faces. You, not you, you. Arbitrary, random. A commissar's finger determining whether you lived or died. The finger pointed at me. The first night. The bulk landers hold stank of sweat, vomit, and fear. We were packed in like cargo, 2,000 souls per hold, standing room only. The engines screamed as we lifted into orbit, the G-forces pressing us against one another until ribs cracked and lungs burned. Some prayed, some wept, most simply stared into nothing, processing the incomprehensible reality that their lives were over. I found myself standing next to a man old enough to be my grandfather, 44 years, the maximum conscription age. His name was Harrick. He had been a foreman at a Promethium refinery. "You know what they don't tell you," he said, his voice barely audible over the engine roar. I shook my head. The average life expectancy of a guardsman in active combat is 15 hours. I read it in a Munitorum document once, back when I had clearance. 15 hours from the moment you deploy to the moment you die. I did not believe him. I thought it propaganda, an exaggeration meant to frighten. Later, I would learn he was optimistic. Let your breathing slow. We ascend to the training hells. Transit. The voyage to our training world took 3 months in the warp. 3 months crammed in a troop transport designed for cargo, not comfort. We slept in shifts on metal racks stacked 6 high. We ate protein paste from tubes that tasted like machine oil. We drank recycled water that never quite lost the taste of urine. 27 citizens died during transit. Disease, mostly. Some virulent strain of ship fever that spread through the holds despite the medicis' attempts at quarantine. The bodies were processed through the ship's corpse starch recyclers. We ate our dead and did not speak of it. The commissars walked among us daily, delivering sermons on duty, faith, and the Emperor's glory. We were told we were blessed to serve, that countless worlds envied our opportunity, that death in the Emperor's name was the highest honor a human could achieve. Some believed this. I saw it in their eyes, a fanatic light, a desperate need to find meaning in the nightmare. They became the commissar's favorites, given extra rations, assigned leadership roles even before we reached training. Others did not believe. They whispered sedition in the dark, spoke of mutiny, of somehow escaping when we made planetfall. The commissars shot 3 of them in front of the entire company. Summary execution for defeatist talk. Their bodies joined the recyclers. We learned quickly. You could question orders in your heart, but never with your mouth. Arrival 80, SCHOLA PROGNIUM Training World TYPHON VII. Typhon VII is a death world. Not in the official administratum classification. It lacks the Xenos megafauna or deadly flora that would earn that designation, but it kills all the same. The temperature ranged from -40 at night to +60 during the day. The atmosphere was breathable but corrosive, slowly scarring lungs with every breath. The gravity was 1.3 standard, making every movement exhausting. The terrain was volcanic rock, ash plains, and poisonous geysers. This was where the Imperium turned civilians into soldiers. We disembarked directly into a forced march. No orientation, no welcome, just drill abbots screaming orders while we stumbled across black sand under a sun that burned like an accusing eye. Move, meat. You are nothing. You are less than nothing. You are unworthy even of death until you prove yourselves in the Emperor's name. Move. Those who fell were beaten with shock mauls until they rose or died. 3 citizens died in the first hour. Their bodies were left where they fell, markers for the next group. We marched for 18 hours straight. My feet blistered, then bled, then went numb. My vision narrowed to the back of the person in front of me. My entire world became the next step and the next and the next. When we finally reached the training compound, a sprawl of prefab barracks and obstacle courses carved into volcanic rock, we were given 1 hour to sleep before training began. I collapsed onto my bunk and did not dream. There was no energy left even for nightmares. Let your body relax into the horror. The worst is yet to come. End of Part 1. That first night I believed I would die in training. I did not yet understand that training was mercy compared to what waited beyond. Sleep now if you can. When you wake, I shall describe the 12 weeks that killed more of us than any enemy ever would. The Emperor's angels do not need to break us. We break ourselves. This is the way of the tithe. Scribe Militant Voss returns. The medici have given me dreamless sleep tablets, but I refuse them. To forget is to dishonor the dead. 12 weeks of training on Typhon VII. 12 weeks that transformed 120,000 Carthian civilians into the 88th Carthian Infantry Regiment. We began as children. We ended as something else. Not quite soldiers, not quite broken, somewhere in between. Listen. The first lesson was simple. You are not human anymore. You are not Jaron, son of Marcus and Ellen Voss. You are not a farmer, a lover, a citizen with dreams and fears. You are a weapon, a lasgun with legs, a mechanism designed to kill the Emperor's enemies and die in the attempt. The drill abbots reinforced this lesson every hour of every day. You think you matter. You think your life has value. Every second, 10,000 guardsmen die across the Imperium. You are replaceable. You are ammunition. The only question is whether you will be expended wisely or wasted. We woke at 400 hours to the sound of artillery fire, live rounds, no blanks, impacting the ground 50 meters from our barracks. We had 7 minutes to dress, assemble in formation, and begin morning exercises. Those who were late received punishment detail. 24 hours of hard labor with no sleep, digging latrines or moving ammunition crates in Typhon's crushing gravity. I was late once, only once. Physical conditioning. The human body is remarkably adaptable. Given sufficient stress and minimal recovery, it will either strengthen or break. The Munitorum does not care which. Our days began with a 10-kilometer run in full kit. Flak armor, rucksack, lasgun, water canister, entrenching tool. 30 kilograms of equipment in 1.3 gravity across terrain that varied from jagged volcanic rock to sucking ash mud that swallowed boots whole. Drill Abbot Cranach, a veteran of the Armageddon Steel Legion, set the pace. He was 60 years old, missing his left eye and 3 fingers, and he ran like a machine. Anyone who fell more than 10 meters behind the formation received a shock maul strike to the spine. The enemy will not wait for you. Orcs do not care if you are tired. Traitors do not pause because your feet hurt. Move or die. After the run came calisthenics, push-ups until muscle failure, squats until legs trembled, pull-ups on bars slick with other people's blood and sweat. Hour after hour, pushing past exhaustion into a strange state where pain became background noise and the body simply continued. Citizens collapsed daily, heart attacks mostly among the older conscripts. Heat stroke claimed dozens more. The medici would check for a pulse, shake their heads, and mark the corpse for processing. By week 3, our company of 2,000 had lost 147 to physical training alone. Let your breathing remain steady. The body's breaking is merciful compared to the mind's. WPONS drill. The M36 lasgun is the Imperium standard infantry weapon. It fires a laser bolt capable of punching through light armor and cauterizing wounds instantly. It is powered by a charge pack that provides approximately 100 shots before requiring replacement. It is durable, reliable, and simple enough that a child can operate it. We spent 4 hours every day learning to maintain, operate, and worship our lasguns. Yes, worship. The cult Mechanicus teaches that every weapon is a holy tool, a fragment of the Omnissiah's will made manifest. We learned the litany of loading, the prayer of accuracy, the rites of maintenance. Before every firing drill, we had to recite the soldier's creed while holding our lasgun above our heads. Blessed be this weapon in the Emperor's name. May it strike true against his enemies. May I never waver. May I never fail. My life is his currency. My death is his will. The Emperor protects. Failure to recite the creed perfectly resulted in punishment. Drill Abbot Cranach would force the offender to hold their lasgun at arm's length until their muscles gave out, sometimes an hour, sometimes longer. I watched a conscript named Torvald drop his weapon after 90 minutes. Cranach shot him in the leg with a las pistol. When you drop your weapon in combat, the enemy does not give you another chance. You die. This is mercy. Torvald survived, but walked with a limp for the rest of his brief life. We learned to fire from standing, kneeling, prone. We learned to fire while advancing, while retreating, while wounded. We fired thousands of rounds at targets shaped like orcs, traitor marines, tyrannids. The targets never fired back. That would come later. Tactical training. War in the 41st millennium is not glorious. It is trenches and mud and artillery. It is holding a position until relieved or annihilated, whichever comes first. It is dying for terrain that holds no strategic value because the Munitorum strategists 3 sectors away decided it matters. We learned to dig trenches, deep, reinforced fighting positions with firing steps, overhead cover and drainage channels. We spent entire weeks living in those trenches while drill abbots called down artillery simulations and threw smoke grenades to simulate chemical weapons. Gas, gas, gas. We had 8 seconds to don rebreather masks or suffer the consequences. The consequences were vomiting, temporary blindness, and a beating for failing to respond fast enough. We learned to advance under fire, crawling through barbed wire while live rounds cracked overhead. Close enough that you could feel the heat. Citizens who panicked and stood up were shot, not fatally, usually, a round through the shoulder or thigh enough to wound and terrify. In combat, you do not have the luxury of fear. Fear kills, discipline saves, trust your training and advance. We learned combined arms tactics, how to coordinate with armor, how to call in artillery, how to mark targets for close air support. This training was largely theoretical. Most guard regiments never see armor support. Artillery is often hundreds of kilometers away. Air support is a myth told to boost morale. But we learned anyway, because the Tactica Imperium demanded it. Psychological conditioning. The most insidious part of training was not the physical torture. It was the psychological reconditioning. Every evening, after 16 hours of drills and marches and brutality, we were herded into chapel for sermons delivered by Commissar Markham and the regimental ministorum priests. They taught us to hate. Not strategically, not tactically, but viscerally. We watched pick captures of orc atrocities, human civilians flayed and eaten, children impaled on crude spikes. We saw tyrannid swarms devouring entire hive cities, the screams of billions echoing across Vox channels. We witnessed chaos corruption, loyal citizens transformed into gibbering, tentacled abominations. These are the Emperor's enemies. These are the Xenos, the heretic, the mutant. They exist only to destroy humanity. There can be no peace, no mercy, no hesitation. Your hatred is holy. Your fury is righteous. Kill without thought, die without regret. The sermons were accompanied by hymns, incense, psycho-conditioning subsonics that made your skull ache and your hands tremble with suppressed rage. Some citizens embraced this. I watched gentle farmers become zealots, eyes burning with fanatical light, shouting prayers and epithets with foaming mouths. Others retreated inward, becoming hollow. They followed orders, but their eyes were empty, souls already dead though their bodies continued marching. I tried to maintain balance. I hated the enemy because hate made killing easier, but I did not let hate consume me. I held on to fragments of who I was, memories of Sarna's laugh, the smell of obscura grain at harvest, my mother's hands braiding bread. These memories kept me human. Barely. Let your mind drift now. Feel the erosion of self. The first casualty. In week 7, Drill Abbot Cranach introduced live fire exercises. We were divided into squads and sent into a mock battlefield, a valley between volcanic ridges, filled with trenches, bunkers, and obstacles. Half the company would defend, half would attack. We used live ammunition. This is not a game. This is war. If you die here, you are too weak to serve the Emperor in real combat. Better to die now than waste the Imperium's resources on a coward. The defending force was given orders to fire high, aimed shots above the attackers' heads. But in the chaos of simulated combat, with smoke and noise and fear, mistakes happen. Private Helvin, a conscript from my barracks block, took a lasbolt through the throat during our first assault. I was 3 meters away when it happened. I saw the flash, heard the wet crackle of superheated flesh, watched him collapse clutching his neck. He drowned in his own blood in 11 seconds. We did not stop the exercise. We stepped over his body and continued advancing, because the drill abbots were screaming that the enemy would not pause for casualties, so neither would we. Helvin was declared a training fatality. His body was processed. His family received a notification that he had died honorably in the Emperor's service. They were never told it was during training, shot by a fellow Carthian who misjudged range and panic-fired. 9 more citizens died in live-fire exercises over the following weeks. We stopped learning their names. Graduation. Week 12 arrived like an execution date. We had begun as 120,000 conscripts. Disease, training accidents, suicides, and summary executions had reduced us to 93,000. The Munitorum deemed this acceptable wastage. The final week was Hell Week, 7 days of continuous operations with minimal sleep, food, or rest. We were dropped into Typhon's ash wastes with only our basic kit and ordered to march 200 kilometers to extraction, evading enemy forces, veteran guardsmen from other regiments, given free rein to hunt us with non-lethal but agonizing weaponry. Those who completed the march graduated. Those who did not were recycled into penal legions or support roles, cooks, laborers, corpse haulers. I completed the march, barely. On the final day, we stood in formation on the parade ground while Commissar Markham delivered our commissioning speech. You are no longer citizens. You are guardsmen of the 88th Carthian Infantry Regiment. You will fight. You will suffer. You will die. And in death you will be remembered, for you died in service to the Emperor of mankind. This is the only meaning your lives possess. This is the only glory you will ever know. Embrace it. We were given our regimental insignia, a silver cog on a red field, symbol of Carthae Secundus. We were issued our full kit, armor, weapons, rations, everything we would need until we died. Then we were loaded onto troop ships and sent to war. 12 weeks, 93,000 survivors, ready to be fed into the Imperium's endless war machine. Let your breathing deepen. The training is over. The dying begins. First deployment, Orpheus Salient. The Orpheus Salient was a cluster of 17 systems on the Segmentum Tempestus frontier, contested between the Imperium and a Walag, led by warboss Scarfang. 300 million Imperial Guardsmen were committed to the campaign. The 88th Carthian was assigned to the second wave, reinforcing the embattled 221st Cadian and 57th Talarn regiments on the world of Khazant Prime. We entered the system through warp transit. The journey took 3 weeks of subjective time, though chronometers suggested 6 months had passed in real space. The warp does not care for human schedules. When we translated back to real space, the fleet was immediately engaged by Orc rocks, asteroid fortresses hurled through the void, bristling with weapons and insane greenskin pilots. Our transport, the Righteous Deliverance, took a direct hit to the aft quarter. 1,700 guardsmen died instantly, vaporized when the plasma drives ruptured. The ship spun out of control, bleeding atmosphere and bodies into the void. Emergency protocols activated. We were loaded into drop pods, coffin-sized metal tubes designed for rapid planetary insertion. 40 soldiers per pod, standing room only, no windows, no controls. The drop was supposed to take 6 minutes. It felt like 6 hours. The pod shook violently as we hit atmosphere, the hull glowing red-hot. The temperature inside climbed until sweat poured and consciousness wavered. I heard someone praying, someone else vomiting, someone screaming. Then impact. The pod struck ground at terminal velocity, cushioned only by retro thrusters that fired 3 seconds before landing. The G-forces were crushing. I felt ribs crack, heard bones break around me. The pod doors blew open, flooding us with light and sound. Welcome to the war. First contact. Khazant Prime was a hell world even before the orcs arrived. Acidic rain, toxic soil, atmosphere thick with industrial pollutants from the now-ruined hive cities. The sky was the color of infected flesh. We stumbled out of the drop pod into a cratered wasteland. The air tasted like burning copper. Artillery fire thundered in the distance, our own guns, hammering orc positions somewhere beyond the horizon. Drill Abbot Cranach, now Sergeant Cranach, promoted to command our company, screamed orders. Form up, 1st Platoon, secure the perimeter. 2nd Platoon, establish Vox contact with command. 3rd Platoon. The words died in his throat as the ground erupted. Orcs. Not on the horizon, not in the distance. Here, now, bursting from crude tunnels dug beneath the battlefield, roaring their savage war cries. They were massive, 3 meters tall, green-skinned, muscles like corded steel. They wore crude armor welded from scrap metal and wielded weapons that looked more like industrial accidents than firearms. But they were terrifyingly effective. The first orc through the tunnel line swung a massive choppa, a chain axe the size of a man, and bisected Private Helkin before he could raise his lasgun. The second orc fired a slugga, a crude pistol that hurled massive caliber rounds with explosive force, and 3 guardsmen exploded into red mist. Then they were among us. Training vanished, discipline shattered. We fired wildly, lasgun bolts flashing in every direction. Some struck orcs, burning holes in their flesh that they ignored, laughing as they killed. Most missed entirely. I emptied my entire charge pack, 100 shots, into a single orc. It kept coming until the 97th shot finally punched through its skull and scrambled what passed for its brain. The fight lasted 4 minutes. 73 guardsmen died. We killed 11 orcs. This was the Imperium's exchange rate, 7 humans per greenskin. We were told we had done well. Let your body settle, the worst memory approaches. The 15-hour war. Herrick had been right about the life expectancy. The 88th Carthian held the line on Khazant Prime for 3 years. In that time, the regiment was effectively destroyed and rebuilt 6 times over. Of the 93,000 who deployed, fewer than 4,000 survived the campaign. My own experience condensed to a series of fragmentary nightmares. Holding a trench for 18 hours while orcs charged in endless waves, their bodies piling so high we used them as cover. Watching Sarna die, she had been assigned to 2nd Company, when an orc shell hit her position. I found fragments of her armor in the mud, nothing else. Being buried alive when an artillery strike collapsed my bunker. Digging my way out with bare hands, clawing through corpses, emerging into daylight covered in other people's blood. The commissar executions, watching men shot for cowardice, for defeatism, for retreating without orders. Watching and doing nothing because to object was to die beside them. The final battle, when the Cadian 221st launched a suicidal assault that broke the orc lines and turned the tide. We advanced across a plain carpeted with dead, human and orc, indistinguishable in the mud, a biomass of rotting flesh that squelched beneath boots. Victory was declared. The Orpheus salient was secured at a cost of 80 million Imperial Guardsmen. The 88th Carthian received a commendation, a scrap of parchment signed by a Lord General we never met, praising our courage and sacrifice. It meant nothing. 3 years, 3 years of dying slowly day by day, losing pieces of yourself until nothing remains but reflexes and numbness. I survived, most did not. And when it ended, I was not sent home. No guardsman ever goes home. We were reassigned, refitted, and prepared for the next campaign. Sleep now. In the final part, I will tell you what becomes of those who survive. Spoiler, it is not mercy. The Emperor's service is eternal. Scroll Part 3. The AFTERWARD 20 minutes. Opening. Scribe Militant Voss Final Testimony. The Orpheus Salient was my baptism. What followed was my education in the true nature of the Imperium. Veterans do not retire. We do not heal. We simply continue until we are expended. This is the fate of all who are drafted. This is the reality behind the propaganda. Listen and understand what it truly means to serve. Victory is a lie. On Khazant Prime, after 3 years of slaughter, the Orc Wagog was broken. Warboss Scarfang was slain by Akkadian Kassakin kill team. His forces, leaderless and fragmenting, were hunted down and exterminated over the following months. The Imperium declared the Orpheus Salient secure. Parades were held on distant capital worlds. Medals were distributed to officers who had never set foot on the battlefield. The propaganda machine churned outpicked captures of guardsmen, raising the Aquila over captured Orc fortresses, smiling despite exhaustion and trauma. None of this reached us. We stood in formation on a landing field slick with oil and blood, waiting for transport to somewhere. We did not know. We were not told. The Munitorum does not explain itself to guardsmen. Of the 93,000 Carthians who deployed to Orpheus, 4,200 remained. The rest were dead, missing, or so maimed they had been invalided out to Medici stations. We were the survivors. This did not make us lucky. Let your breathing slow. The relief you expect will not come. Reassignment. The transport that arrived was not heading for Carthage Secundus. It was heading for a staging world designated only as Munitorum Station Gamma 745. I approached Sergeant Kranich. He had survived, though his left arm was now bionic, and his face bore burned scars from a flamer incident I tried not to remember. "Sergeant, are we not returning home? The campaign is over." He laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Guardsman Voss, no one told you. You do not go home, ever. The moment you were conscripted, you ceased to belong to Carthage. You belong to the Imperium now. You will be reassigned to another war zone and another until you die or become too broken to fight. This is the way of the Guard." "But my service term." "There is no service term. You serve until death or incapacitation. Those are the only releases." The words settled over me like ash from Typhon VII's volcanoes. I would never see Carthage again, never see my mother, never stand in the obscura grain fields under that familiar sun. My home was gone, replaced by an endless succession of battlefields I could not name. This was the truth. They did not tell you when the tithe came due. Conscription was not service. It was a life sentence. MUNITORUM Station, Gamma 745. The staging world was a nightmare of bureaucracy and processing. Millions of guardsmen from shattered regiments gathered here, awaiting reassignment. We were sorted by specialty, infantry, heavy weapons, armor crew, etc., and reorganized into composite units. The 88th Carthian Infantry Regiment ceased to exist. Our survivors were divided among a dozen different formations. I lost contact with everyone I had trained with, fought beside, bled with. Sergeant Kranich was assigned to a veteran penal legion. His disciplinary record from Orpheus, where he had executed 3 guardsmen for cowardice, made him unsuitable for standard units. I was reassigned to the 449th Composite Infantry Regiment, a hodgepodge formation of survivors from 17 different worlds. We had no shared culture, no common language beyond Low Gothic, no unit cohesion. We were given 2 weeks to integrate before deploying to our next campaign. 2 weeks. That was the Imperium's idea of rest and recovery after 3 years of combat. The nature of continuous deployment. Guardsmen exist in a state of perpetual war. Between major campaigns, we are shuffled from garrison duty to suppression operations to peacekeeping missions that are anything but peaceful. My next assignment was Hestris IV, a mining world experiencing labor unrest. 30 million workers had gone on strike, demanding better conditions after a cave-in killed 16,000. Our orders were simple: restore order. This meant opening fire on unarmed civilians. I will not describe it in detail. The memory makes my hands shake even now. But understand, we killed more humans on Hestris IV than I killed orcs on Cosent Prime. We did this because the Administratum demanded it, because production quotas mattered more than lives, because the Imperium cannot tolerate dissent. Afterward, the survivors were returned to work. The dead were processed into corpse starch to feed other workers. The wheel turned. Let your muscles release their tension. The horror is banal, routine, endless. What happens to veterans? Not all guardsmen die in combat. Some survive long enough to become something else. I met a veteran named Coulter. He had served for 42 years across 18 campaigns. His body was more bionic than flesh, both legs replaced, one arm, his left eye, portions of his ribcage. He wheezed when he spoke, his augmented lungs struggling against 3 decades of breathing toxic atmospheres. "How did you survive so long?" I asked. He looked at me with his one organic eye, milky, half-blind, and smiled without humor. "Luck, cowardice, competence. Choose whichever answer comforts you. The truth is I stopped caring about survival somewhere around year 15. After that I simply continued. Muscle memory, reflexes. I do not think anymore, I react. This is what you become if you survive long enough, a biological machine executing directives without thought." He died 3 weeks later, not in combat but from organ failure. His augmented heart simply stopped during a routine march. They recycled his bionics and burned the organic remains. 42 years of service. That was his reward, death on a staging world, not even in battle. This is the fate awaiting all long-term survivors. The psychological cost. The Departamento Munitorum does not acknowledge trauma. There is no concept of battle fatigue or combat stress in official doctrine. You are either fit for duty or you are not. If you cannot fight, you are either sent to penal legions or executed for cowardice. But trauma does not care about doctrine. I began experiencing symptoms in my 2nd year on Orpheus. Nightmares so vivid I would wake screaming, weapon drawn, firing at phantoms. Intrusive thoughts of the dead, their faces, their voices, accusing me of surviving when they did not. Hypervigilance so severe I could not sleep without chemical assistance. The regimental medici gave me a bottle of stim tabs, amphetamines to keep me alert during combat, and told me to pray more. Prayer did not help. I watched men break in different ways. Some became catatonic, staring into nothing, refusing to move even when ordered. They were shot for desertion. Others became berserkers, charging enemy positions alone, seeking death with a desperate hunger. They usually found it. A few simply walked into the wilderness and disappeared. Whether they died of exposure or found some escape, I never learned. I survived by compartmentalizing. I locked memories away in mental boxes, only opening them when necessary. I became 2 people: Jaren the guardsman, who killed efficiently and followed orders without hesitation, and Jaren the scribe, who observed everything with detached horror and wrote it down in the rare moments of quiet. This fragmentation kept me functional. It also meant I was no longer entirely sane. The fate of the drafted. Let me summarize the statistical reality of Imperial Guard service. based on Munitorum data I have processed in my current assignment. Average life expectancy in active combat, 15 hours from first deployment to death. Survival rate past first year, approximately 23%. Survival rate past 5 years, approximately 4%. Survival rate past 10 years, less than 1%. Guardsmen who return to their homeworlds, effectively zero. Do you understand? When the tithe comes and your name is called, you are already dead. The only question is how long your body will continue functioning before it realizes this fact. You will not be a hero, you will be a statistic. You will not see your family again. You will die on a world whose name you cannot pronounce, fighting enemies you do not understand, for objectives that will be forgotten before your corpse cools. Your sacrifice will be necessary. The Imperium demands it. 1,000,000 worlds cannot be defended by volunteers alone. The grinding horror of the Guard is the only thing standing between humanity and extinction. But do not mistake necessity for glory. My current posting. I am one of the statistically impossible. I served 6 years in combat across 4 campaigns before suffering what the Medici termed catastrophic psychological trauma during the Gallus suppression. I do not remember the incident clearly. The Medici reports suggest I experienced a psychotic break, stopped responding to orders, and was found sitting in a trench surrounded by corpses, weeping and reciting my mother's obscura bread recipe over and over. I should have been executed. Instead, a commissar, Commissar Thane, Emperor bless his pragmatism, recognized that my skills as a scribe might be salvaged even if my combat effectiveness was destroyed. He requisitioned my transfer to the Munitorum archives, where I now process casualty reports and tithe assessments. This is why I can write this testimony. This is why I know the numbers, the statistics, the truth behind the propaganda. Every day I read the names of the dead, thousands of names, tens of thousands. I process them into data files, update regimental rosters, calculate replacement requirements. Each name was a person. Each person had a story like mine, a family, a home, a life interrupted by the tithe and ground into paste by the Imperium's war machine. I remember them because someone must. The truth about glory. The propaganda says that death in the Emperor's service is glorious, that your sacrifice matters, that you will be remembered. This is not entirely a lie. Your sacrifice does matter. Without the Imperial Guard, the Imperium would collapse. Every guardsman who dies buying time for evacuation, holding a trench against impossible odds, or simply absorbing enemy fire so that armor can advance, these deaths have strategic value. But you, individually, you will not be remembered. There are too many dead, too many names. The Imperium cannot afford to memorialize every fallen guardsman. You will be a number in a casualty report, processed by someone like me, filed away and forgotten. Your family will receive a notification. Guardsman name died honorably in service to the Emperor. They will never know how you died, where you died, or why. They will never see your body. They will never have closure. This is the price of serving an empire spanning 1,000,000 worlds. Individual lives cannot matter when trillions die every day across the galaxy. So if you are drafted, understand this. You are not special. Your life has no inherent value to the Imperium beyond its utility as ammunition. But perhaps, you can find meaning anyway. Not in glory or recognition, but in smaller things. The guardsman beside you in the trench. The enemy you killed before they could kill your squad. The one moment of competence or courage that saved a life, even if only for a day. These are the only victories available to the drafted. They are small, they are temporary, they will be forgotten. But in the moment, they are real. Let this knowledge settle over you like a benediction. Closing testimony. I am Scribe Militant Jaron Voss, survivor of the 88th Carthian Infantry Regiment. I was 18 years old when I was drafted. I am 27 now. I have lived longer than I had any right to expect. I will never return to Carthage Secundus. I will never see my mother again. She died 3 years ago, according to administratum records. I will never marry, never have children, never live a normal life. The Imperium took everything from me, and gave me nothing but nightmares and the dubious honor of processing the deaths of others. And yet I remain loyal. Not because I believe in the glory of the Imperium, not because I think my sacrifice mattered in any cosmic sense, but because the alternative, allowing the galaxy to fall to chaos, to the Xenos, to the void, is worse. The Imperium is cruel, inefficient, and monstrous, but it is the only thing preventing humanity's extinction. So we serve, we suffer, we die. And perhaps, in some distant future our bones will never see, humanity will evolve beyond the need for such sacrifice. Until then, the tithe continues. The draft comes, and young men and women across 1,000,000 worlds answer the call, not knowing they are already dead. By the Golden Throne, I testify this truth. By the Emperor's name, I seal this account. May those who read it understand the cost of our survival. And may they never forget the names we could not remember. The archive is closed. The testimony complete. In his name, eternal vigilance. In his service, eternal sacrifice. For the Emperor of mankind. The Emperor protects, even when he does not.